Welcome to another episode of Cadence Fishing TV. It's New Year's Day and we're fishing on the Gloucester Canal, and it's been a bit of a miserable morning and I've had a fuzzy head, but we've started to catch some nice bream and the weather's brightened up, so it's just great to be out the house and catching some fish. That's a smaller bream. About a pound, pound and a half. I've had another one like that and two bigger bream between 3 and 4 pounds. So considering the conditions, we're really pleased just to get some fish in the net. Well, we've had some really extreme weather in the last few weeks with a lot of snow and very cold conditions, and in the last week there's been a lot of rain and snow melt, which has meant the rivers are just completely wiped out. The rivers are in the fields. We were desperate to get out, and after talking to my good friend and brand ambassador Colin Harvey, who's joined us today, we decided to have a look out to an old favourite venue, and that's the Gloucester Canal. I made a quick call yesterday to Tony Davis, who's a really famous local angler, and he suggested we come and fish on this dead arm at Hempstead. And I've never actually fished these pegs before. In the past I'd fished the Gloucester Canal quite a bit, and I'm familiar with where Hempstead is, but in the recent past, in the last 10 years, they've re-diverted the canal and created this dead arm, and Tony assured us that there's some good bream to be caught here, and even in the coldest conditions him and his friends have been catching them, so it's proved to be great advice, just the fact that we've had some bites and fish already. One thing that kind of concerned me when I got here this morning was how coloured the canal is, and I think that must be due to all the rain and snow melt and flooding that we've had over the last few weeks. I've fished it in the past when the canal's been really clear, and sometimes when you've had an influx of cold water like this snow melt and flood water, it can knock the fishing on the head, so we were a bit worried. But when we started this morning, we started to get some indications and knocks on the tip, just showing us that there was some fish here, and that gave us some heart really. And we've been fishing now for about an hour and a half, and although we're not catching loads of fish, we're getting bites and we're catching some really nice quality bream, which the Gloucester's now really famous for. I remember in the past that when we used to match fish here, the stamp of the bream was around about a pound, and it's really apparent now in recent years that the size of the bream and the numbers of the bream have really increased, and it's actually a really prolific venue now, and one that I think I'd like to fish a bit more. I'd sort of forgotten really what a wonderful venue it is. Well, the peg that I've selected is peg 7 and Colin's on peg 8, and Tony had explained that these are really reliable pegs, and the line that I'm fishing is about 2/3 out towards the far bank, and feels like it's just down the bottom of the ledge. There's still a pronounced ledge on this dead arm from when it used to be the canal, and we felt that just by fishing into the deeper water, that's probably where the bream and skimmers will be. And I've also fed a closer line, really on a pole line, but fishing with my wand, around about 12 meters out. So it just gives us an option to use that line and rest the main line. And I know from what Tony and Colin have said, that closer line can be really productive on certain days. So we started off quite carefully, really, just not too sure about how it was going to fish, and I just put 3 or 4 medium-sized feederfuls of groundbait and casters on the short line, and then started with the same size feeder just by casting out and leaving the feeder in for 2 minutes before recasting. And now I've switched to a much smaller feeder and I'm leaving the bait out a lot longer. Seems to be, I'm getting the bites after perhaps 5 to 10 minutes of the feeder being in the water. So we just want to really try and build the swim up and not overfeed it, because it would be easy to do that on a cold day like this and perhaps not catch any fish at all. I had one more good skimmer on the long line and the swim went a bit dead, so I tried my close in line with the wand and had 2 small skimmers about 6 ounces. So my idea was to try and rest the long line, and I'm just going to go back out on it now and give it another go. I'm just fishing with this small cage feeder and introducing small amounts of casters and a bit of chop worm. So I'm still fishing really cautiously today, just trying to eke out as many fish as we can. And hook bait, that's half a small red worm and a fluoro pinky, and I've had 2 of the bream on that today and 1 on a red maggot and a pinky. Well, it is proving to be a fascinating day. We know the fish are there because we caught those fish relatively early, and it has gone a little bit quiet now. So this is where you can start trying a few tricks to try and tempt more bites. I've been changing my hook baits, and I've been changing what I'm putting through the feeder, and also searching around the peg just a little bit. Colin's got 5 skimmers, a perch and a daddy rough, so we've probably got about the same amount of fish between us. I just hope we can catch some more of those bigger bream like we started. Well, bream fishing on any venue and in any conditions really can be a bit of a waiting game, and especially on cold days like this when the fishing's hard, it can be a good idea to leave the bait in and really be as patient as possible. You're sort of itching to keep reeling in and changing your bait and trying different things, but a good bit of advice I've always had is, you know, be prepared to leave your bait out, and the old expression, sit on your hands and wait. And that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm going to leave this bait out now for as long as I can and just see if we can tempt one of those sneaky bream. Okay, let's have a look at the gear and rigs that we're using today. The rod I'm using on my longer line is the CR10 12-foot number 2 feeder, and it's a beautiful rod for fishing sort of short, medium range on big canals like this, lakes and rivers. It's got a beautiful progressive action that's great when you're catching bream and skimmers like this. I've selected the finest 1 ounce tip, which is proving to be more than sensitive enough to spot the bites today, and I've coupled up with the CS8 4000 reel, and I'm actually using braided line. This is 4-pound fire line, and you can just see here where I've got my knot onto my shot leader. I nearly always use a shot leader when I'm fishing with braid, not just to protect against cracking off when I'm casting, but to incorporate a little bit of give and stretch into the rig. And I've actually got just about 2 lengths of my rod, so that's got to be about 24 foot of shot leader. And then I've got a standard paternoster rig, so that must be on a drop of around about 8 inches. And I'm fishing with a hook length of around about 4 foot, and that seems to be working best today. I've tried shorter and longer. And I'm going to cast this out. I'm going to try double red, dead red maggot on the size 18 B560 hook. I'm using an 0.10mm hook length. And this time I'm not going to put any feed in my feeder apart from just neat ground bait. So I think that's a really good tip when it's hard. I'm not feeding anything in the feeder, just ground bait, and hopefully that will attract the fish and they'll take the hook bait. So I'll cast that out and then I'll show you how I tie that paternoster rig. So the shot leader that I'm using today is this Pro Gold 4.4 pound, which has a diameter of 0.19mm. So if I was using a heavier feeder and casting longer distance, I'd step up my shot leader. But as we're only casting a short distance today with small, medium feeders, I don't need a heavy shot leader. So we'll pretend that that's attached to my braid. and I'll show you how I tie this very simple paternoster. So that's the length of leader there, and what I simply do is form a loop in that shot leader, and obviously I can vary that length of loop depending on how long I want the paternoster to be. So I'm just going to tie a loop. I like to use the figure of 8 knot when I'm tying all my loops, and then that provides my paternoster. And I've got this loose end here which I don't cut, and I tie my hook length to that. And what I like to do, I don't use a snap swivel. All my feeders have got a standard swivel on like that, and what I'll do is I'll push the loop through the swivel and then pull the feeder back through that loop, and then I've got a really neat and simple paternoster without any big bulky swivels or snap swivels that can be prone to tangling. But I've also got the flexibility of being able to very quickly change the feeder by just taking that loop off, pulling the feeder back through, and then changing to a different feeder. And you'll see that today I've got a variety of different feeders in different sizes and different styles. For my initial feed, and when I want to get my feed into a tight area, I favour using an open end feeder like that with the bulk of the feeder taped up, so I can get a lot of chop worm and casters in that feeder if I need to, and then just simply plug each end with the ground bait. So that's a great way of introducing feed quickly and very accurately into the swim. But conversely, if I want to create the feed to come out quicker, I might switch to a small cage like that, or even a bigger cage. If I want to spread the feed out and perhaps attract the fish by dispersing the feed in more of a cloud and attracting the fish into the swim. So during the session I'll switch between different feeders, but I just thought it was interesting to show you the simple paternoster that I use. And just to finish that, so I've got my loop there that the feeder goes on, and then I'll tie my hook length directly onto that. So today we're using 010, and I actually use the same knot, that figure of 8 knot, to join the two pieces of line together. So I would lay the two lines together, wet it, and then form that figure of 8 knot and pull both through, look, and then I've got that figure of 8. Make sure that you pull it all together nice and neatly, and you've got a very strong, in fact I think that's the strongest knot I've ever used, but it's also very neat. There's no size or bulkiness to the knot at all. And you'll notice that the tag between the paternoster and that hook length knot is way longer than the paternoster. If you make it shorter, you'll find that the lower diameter hook length will tangle around the paternoster. So there you go, that's the rig that we're using today, and one that I use a lot when I'm feeder fishing for skimmers. So the gear I'm using on the shorter line is a shorter rod, and it's the CR10 10-foot wand, which really goes back to the original ones that were actually designed for fishing on the Gloucester Canal. And the great advantage of them is that we've got a very soft glass tip. So it's quite a specialised rod, but it's absolutely great when you're fishing on hard days. You need to spot the slightest of bites. You're not casting long distances. So I've matched the wand with the same reel as on the longer 12 foot. I've gone for the 4000 CR10, and in this case I'm not using braid, I'm just fishing with mono, and I've gone for the 019 4-pound Pro Gold. I don't really need to use braid because it's not going to offer any advantage of making the casting easier when I'm fishing short range, and because I'm fishing with such a sensitive tip I don't need that either from the braid, so no problem with the mono. And I'm using the same rig as on the long line as well. So I've got that paternoster rig with a small Drennan cage feeder, similar length, hook length, and I've actually gone for a size 20 B560 on this, just to offer me a smaller hook to perhaps fish with a single red maggot or double pinky. And the great thing about setting this wand up is I can actually clip up at the same distance long, and I can try this presentation over the same line, as well as obviously fishing it shorter. So it's often a great idea to have two rigs set up to cover your options within the swim, even on a relatively short venue like this canal. So to that point, it kind of goes without saying that I'm clipping up. Obviously by clipping up I can keep the accuracy, and on this case with the wand I've actually got the line clipped up on my long line, which is actually 20 turns today, and then I've clipped up at around about 12 meters for the short in line. And for me, you know, really for 99% of my feeder fishing on still waters and canals like this, I always clip up. So the ground bait mix I'm using today is a mix of these 3 ground baits just mixed in third parts. So I've got a third of Bait Tech Pro Feeder ground bait, which is a sweet ground bait, a third of Special G, which is a fish meal ground bait, and it's a green colour, which I'll come on to, and then a third of this fine brown crumb, which I always like to use when I'm bream fishing. One thing I do with this mix, I like to prepare it at home, and I'll grind the mix together to make it as fine as possible, and then I run it through a flour sieve. So when I'm fishing in the winter like this, I just don't want to overfeed the fish, and I'm using the ground bait to attract the fish and then hopefully hold the fish by adding my other baits to it, like the casters and chopped worm. You can see that it is quite a light coloured mix, and I've gone for that because the canal's quite coloured. If the canal was clear, I'd go for a darker mix, so I'd probably add the black Special G version. And I think it's interesting to mention about using fish meal. It's something that's really become so prominent now when you're bream fishing and skimmer fishing, and I have great confidence in using it, but I do like to mix it with a sweeter mix, so I've got the best of both worlds, but it does seem to attract the bigger fish. And what I like to do is mix up the ground bait the night before, keep it in a sealed bag like that, and then when I'm fishing I'll run it back through a maggot riddle in small quantities, so that I'm constantly fishing with a fine mix and a fresh mix that gives me the best chance of attracting the fish. Well, Chappie the cameraman just highlighted something to me that I didn't realise I was doing, but I was rubbing my leg, not because I've got a sore knee, but I'm actually killing one of the maggots so I can use a dead red maggot. And dead reds are just such a fantastic hook bait when you're fishing for skimmers and bream. So there you go, that's a perfect dead red that I've killed by rolling on my knee. And you'll see that it's not shriveled up or gone pale. It's just a perfect dead red maggot. Now why that's a better bait, I don't know. It's certainly proven. Maybe it's because the maggot lies on top of the silt on the bottom of the canal rather than burrowing in, or maybe how it behaves when the fish sucks it in. I don't know, but it's definitely worth considering. And on days like this, when I forgot to bring my frozen dead reds because it's New Year's Day and I was a bit hungover, it's a backup plan. So I'll just, while I'm waiting for a bite, prepare a dead red maggot, and I've got 2 there ready for when I reel in. Perfect. Well, looks like Colin's into another fish, and I know he's got a few good tips for feeder fishing on a canal like this, so perhaps he'll let you into a few of those secrets.
Well, today's been tough fishing. I've just had my 6th skimmer. I've had fish from probably a pound 10 ounces down to about 6 ounces, a perch and a daddy rough. So I've got 8 fish in total on a really, really tough day. I wasn't expecting many fish today. The Gloucester Canal is really, really cold, 4 degrees, but it's one of the few venues in the country you can come to in the winter and actually catch some nice fish. I'm really pleased. James has caught 2 lovely bream, 3-4 pound a piece, plus a few skimmers, and I've had 8 fish, and that's all you can really expect this time of year. I've got a couple of tips that I want to show you now. In the winter months, I don't like to feed very much bait at all. And what I tend to do is I tend to pull one dendrobiner out of a little pot. I don't cut the worms up actually in the pot. All right, and because I want to feed really small amounts of food, I just put the worm on a little clear bit of bottom of the Groundbait bowl, chop it up in about 10 pieces, something like that. So it's all nice and fresh and still slight bit of a movement in it. To that I add literally 6-8 casters, and what I do then is just take the feeder, scoop it all into there, and bingo. And that's the way that I feed in the winter months. You know, there's one dendrobiner in there, probably, I don't know, 8 casters, 9 casters. And I've been doing that all day long. I haven't chopped up a pot of worms, and I started off with half a pint of casters first thing this morning, and there's still at least a quarter of a pint of casters left in the tin. Now, that's a useful thing to do in the winter months, and you don't get through masses of worms, and they last you all winter if you're lucky enough. When I'm feeder fishing on the Gloucester Canal, what I like to do, years ago we used to take feeders up, but these modern Nissa feeders, these are cut down feeders. They're the medium sized one which I cut down, and they've got 4 holes in them. Right now, normally you would fish it like that, how it comes as a commercial feeder, but I turn the lead so that it actually covers those 4 holes there. So you've only got holes on the top, so when that falls through the water, it'll go through the water sort of like that. You know, the water passing either side of it, it's going to take all the bait to the bottom of the river, or in this case the bottom of the Gloucester Canal, and little bait leaches out. I've actually done it in a tank to see what happens, and sure enough it does work. So that's a useful tip when you're fishing venues like this with really, really deep water. Average depth out in this canal is about 15 feet. My setups today have been very simple. I've used a CR10 12-foot number 2 feeder rod for the long line. I'm using 5 pound 020. It's Drennan feeder line. I always find it's a nice line. It's got a little bit of give in it. I'm not a lover of braid in the winter on the canal, and I have that feeder running up and down the line. I don't have a bolt stop or anything like that in the winter. Really, really freely. Quick chain swivel, and I have 2 hook lengths. I have a 16 or sometimes an 18 560 hook for the maggots, and clipped into this here, right, I've 14 hook, which is a guru feeder hook, size 14, that I fish worms on. I put a dendrobiner on that, or red worms. So those are the 2 hooks I use, so I can, and I don't really do much else other than vary the baits. Put that one back in there. On the short rod, this is the Cadence, what I call the wand. It's James's version of an iconic rod, but this is a fantastic little tool. It's 10 foot, it's rated number 1, it's got lovely glass tips in. I'm using the CS10 300 size reel, which is the smaller reel, so I've toned it all down so it's all a nice light set of kit. And my setup for this is the very, very straightforward, simple paternoster rig. So, you know, you've got literally about 10 inches of movement there for the fish to pull. Fish that round about 14, 15 metres out, and I fished the long line at 30 turns of the reel, which is about 25, 26 yards out into the canal. But as I said, it's been a real tough day. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. What else could you do in the middle of winter? It's the 1st of January, and there's not many places you can go and catch 6 or 8 skimmers and a few small fish as well. Fantastic venue, absolutely fantastic venue. And much forgotten, the Gloucester Canal. It's been a strange day today. We started off this morning, cold rain into a very cold water. Then we had probably an hour and a half of bright sunshine. But now the clouds come across again. It's gone 2 o'clock, 10 past 2, and I'm really expecting us to pick up 1 or 2 fish in this last hour and a half. So here goes, and let's see what happens.
Well, I've just had a quiet period of about an hour with no bites, and just had a fish out the blue, and what a bream that is. It's got to be over 4 pounds, and that was just on a single dead red maggot on a 20 hook, so he took a bit of getting out. What a beautiful fish. This feels like another good bream, and I've changed from the red maggot to a red worm and a fluoro pinky. It's just maybe just the light's fading a bit and bringing these bigger bream on the feed. There you go. What a beautiful bream and a great cure for a hangover. Well, I'm only fishing an 010 hook length and a 18 hook, so when I'm playing these big bream I'm having to really take my time. Well, I think that's the 5th decent bream I've had today, and it's another beautifully conditioned fish, perhaps about 3 pounds. What a great session. So Col, how did you end up?
I've had a good day, James. I've had 8 skimmers, a perch and a little tiny daddy ruff, the famous Gloucester Canal daddy ruff. Thoroughly enjoyed it. The fishing was good in my peg up until half 12 or 1 o'clock. Then it seemed to die for some reason. No big bream turned up, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And you've had a cracking day.
No, I've loved it, yeah. You know, I think I definitely had 20 pounds. And given the conditions today and in the lead up to today, with all that snow melt, I'm just amazed that the canal's produced like that.
Yeah, it's a lovely, lovely stretch of canal around here. There's always been bream around this area, and many thanks to Gloucester United Anglers. They've been our hosts for the day, and they've been superb letting us have this superb stretch of water to fish today.
Yeah,
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Talking to Tony Davis about it, he explained that it's really quite inexpensive, so I think we're both going to join.
I think I better go and get the tickets for us pretty soon, mate.
Well, thanks for watching, and all the best for 2018. And I look forward to shooting some more great videos for Cadence Fishing TV. Thanks for watching.